From Shadows for Through the Breach dropped a couple of weeks ago, and we got a whole bunch of new lore to talk about. What's up, everybody? Jeff here, and every time they put out a new Through the Breach expansion, we get a ton of new lore with backgrounds for the faction and all sorts of new information. So now that From Shadows has been out for a while, I figured this would be a good time to go through some of the interesting stuff that we learned. Now keep in mind, this is just a selection of a handful of things that I thought were interesting, and there's plenty more to check out. So if you want to pick up the book yourself, then check out Drive Through RPG for the PDF form, or you can buy the hardcover book from Weird's web store. And if you use the link in the description, you can support the channel while doing it. Speaking of supporting the channel, we just launched a merchandise store. So if you want to pick up a Defective Dice t-shirt, mug, or one of these cool pennants, then you can also find all that linked in the description. Plus, if you head over to the Patreon and support the channel that way, you can actually get 10% off anything in the merchandise store. And on top of that, members of the Patreon get priority access to the Through the Breach games that we run on the channel. Alright, so don't forget to like and subscribe before you go. And with that, let's jump into it. In ancient Malifaux, the Fae and true Nephilim fought against the tyrants, who were trying to subjugate or destroy them. But on Earth, the humans had their own problems, as well as a different group of powerful enemies to defend against. In the Far East, powerful spirits were known to roam the lands, some of whom were benevolent, and some of whom were evil. These spirits, known as Oni in Japan, soon found that they weren't able to maintain their presence on Earth, as the magical force in the realm began to drain. But soon, the malevolent Oni found a way to tear the barrier between their realm, the Beyond, and ours. They invaded, and the humans called on the help of the good Oni, and together tried to fight off the invaders. This became known as the War of Spirits, and though it took many decades, the humans were eventually able to drive the Oni back. This is how they learned of the Beyond, and legend has it that some of the humans left on Earth were still possessed by the evil Oni, or were half Oni themselves. According to stories told to Lin Li by her father as a child, Tan Jiang was a great warrior of Vietnamese legend. He was said to be a young boy who was present when a great evil invaded his land, prompting him to request a mechanical horse and a bundle of bamboo. He then rode into battle, fighting off the evil invaders and helping to defeat their leader before disappearing. We now know that this invasion refers to the War of Spirits and the Oni's attempted invasion of Earth. We don't know how much of the story is true and how much is myth, but another suggestion is that Tan Jiang himself was a half Oni. Hundreds of years after the War of Spirits, and powerful people in the East had been trying to reach out to the Beyond. They realized their mistake too late, and soon portals from the Beyond began opening all over the Three Kingdoms. It was a struggle for all involved, but Japan took the brunt of the invasion, and it saw entire cities wiped off its map. The Japanese government was fractured at the time, but in response to the invasion, 10 of Japan's strongest families came together to organize the resistance against the Oni. Among them was the Katanakas, and while they rode out to do battle against the Oni, their mages worked to seal the portals to the Beyond. The 10 families' armies moved across the battlefield like thunder, and so the legend of the 10 Thunders was born. During the ensuing battle, the Oni were defeated, and their king was slain. The Beyond is a barren land, full of suffering, where it's said that the passage of time is painfully slow. The boundary between the Beyond and other realms is particularly strong, and the denizens of the Beyond have a hard time existing in our world. They can usually only cross over for a short time before flickering out of existence, unless they have some source of energy that allows them to remain. Even when an Oni is killed, its essence is simply transported back to the Beyond, where it takes time to gather its power and regain its physical form. Alternatively, the Oni can stay on Earth if they take a host, possessing their victim and taking over their consciousness, until nothing of the original remains. Another way that the Oni can cross into other realms for long periods of time is through gates. These gem-like stones act like portals, allowing the Oni to see through to other realms, or to travel there unimpeded. The Obsidian Gate is perhaps the most well-known, but there are several others, including the Ruby Gate, which is in the possession of the 10 Thunders in Malifaux, and the Emerald Gate, which is watched over by the Japanese government in the Imperial Palace. At least a handful of others are known about, though most of their locations have been lost to history. We have some decent understanding of the major events that took place in Malifaux's ancient history. However, that understanding has gaps, and we didn't have a clear picture of exactly when some of those events took place. Until now. We now know that when the dragon split himself in two and popped up on Earth, it was approximately 6000 BCE. This means that the Tyrant War and the opening of the Kythera mechanism took place just before that time. We also know that Shezul arrived in Japan in the year 1293. That means that it was over 7,000 years between the Tyrant War and Shezul's resurgence, which culminated in the Black Blood ritual and his defeat. As the Ten Thunders crime syndicate was on the rise, they made an amazing discovery, a secret portal that led from mainland China to the very north of Malifaux. This discovery took place sometime between the 13th and 16th century and was a closely guarded secret by the Ten Thunders for hundreds of years. They established a small settlement that became known as Promise and began bringing soulstones back to Earth to enhance their power and influence. Considering their limited presence in Malifaux due to the extreme levels of secrecy and the vast distance between Promise and Malifaux City being at least weeks or potentially months of travel apart, it's no surprise that the Ten Thunders weren't the first to step foot in the city. When Misaki overthrew her father and took control as Oyabun of the Ten Thunders, she immediately purged several of his generals and high-ranking officials. One, in particular, was spared of the purge. This woman, Shukan, had sided with Misaki after witnessing some of the former Oyabun's dishonorable and reckless behavior. This woman soon became known as Minako Rei and became an important advisor to Misaki as she took over the organization. Any student of history might find it a little strange that Japan and China are in an alliance under the Three Kingdoms. This alliance came about during the Black Powder Wars, when the ruling families of China, Vietnam, and Japan decided to cooperate in the globe-spanning conflict. But things are not as peaceful between the three as it might seem. After being occupied by the Guild, China was the first to kick out the invaders, and is often seen as the strongest of the three. Japan was next to rid themselves of the Guild, and the isolation of their island nation has allowed them to develop the strongest army. Vietnam was occupied most recently, and has the most resentment towards the Guild out of the three. The Vietnamese refuse to cooperate with the Guild, and therefore don't have access to soulstones and constructs like the others, but they have a history of weapons production, and are expert gunsmiths. But grudges between the nations still exist. The Thunders are in the background, trying to manipulate the balance of power, as the Empress of China tries to assert herself, such as by demanding a hefty sum from Vietnam for their help in throwing out the Guild. Each of the three kingdoms is even for now, but that may not always be the case. As a result of the actions of Jiang during the events of the Obsidian Gate, portals have once again been opening to the beyond in Japan. Hordes of Kimon have been pouring through, causing the nation to try to mount a desperate defense, and calling on their allies in Japan and China to help. When Misaki learned of this, she contacted Kaito Katanaka, her second-in-command, who takes care of all the Thunder's operations Earthside, and began sending him information about the Kimon. The Red Library had information about these otherworldly monsters, and Misaki knows that they can't be defeated through traditional means. They would have to call on ancient magic if they want to be victorious. And that's a bunch of cool new stuff that we learned in From Shadows. And that really just scratches the surface. If you're curious to learn more about the Ten Thunders organization or the history of the Three Kingdoms, then definitely pick up the book and check it out. It's got a lot of really interesting information. And a lot of it is hinting at what's probably coming up for the other side, because it's going to focus on the Kimon invasion and the Three Kingdoms. I'm super excited for that. But anyway, drop a comment below and let me know what else you'd be excited to learn about the Three Kingdoms or the Ten Thunders. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, join the Discord, where you can come hang out with the community and talk more about this stuff, and consider supporting us on Patreon, like these folks did at the Extremely Cool Kids tier. The Steam Powered Scoundrels, Dogmatize, and Bicops Gladiator Games. And thanks for watching.